Hi, my name is Molly Dickens. I am a scientist, a maternal health advocate, and a co-founder of a nonprofit that was focused on gender equity through the lens of motherhood-related barriers in the workplace. I am thrilled to introduce today's panel, which is part of Father's Friday summer series. As a mom, I'm grateful for Fathering Together to bringing together such a collection of thought leaders, disruptors, and organizations working to change our perspective on how dads engage with their families, communities, and workplaces. Today's topic focuses on raising empowered daughters. And as a mother of daughters, I cannot underscore the importance of the following conversation enough. So I have two daughters, and when my husband and I sat down to choose names, I set two parameters. I wanted the name to either be androgynous or a strong female name. And at the time, I was thinking about how these gestating baby girls, when they become adults, they will be joining the workplace. And I was worried about how their names, especially as faceless names on a resume, can fuel sexism and gender discrimination. So androgynous name or strong female name. So our younger daughter, her name is Ezra. So obviously that checks the box of androgynous name. And our older daughter is named Ripley, which is, arguably one of the strongest female characters in cinematic history. So that checks that box. But now that my daughters are real humans, so they're 7 and 9 now, I've come to realize that how they show up in the world actually has very little to do with their names. It's the everyday interactions, it's their bravery, it's their boldness, it's how they show up and conquer their world. And so we as parents, you as fathers, now have this important role to play in how our girls conquer their world and how they use their voices. And so this panel is just incredible. We have a moderator, Tim Taylor, in discussion with Corden James, Chris Ye, and Michelle Travis. And they are sharing some incredible insight, inspiration, and most importantly, tools for how to empower and encourage our daughters and allow them to be brave and bold and fierce. And most importantly, how to chart their own course as they head towards adulthood. And hopefully these girls become women, become these humans in this world. They will someday break the very system that told their parents that they had to give their daughters androgynous names. So thank you again for joining us today. The goal of Father's Friday Summer Series is to provide stories and strategies to empower dads to be emotionally courageous, connected, and committed. And I hope you get as much out of this conversation as I did. Enjoy.
Welcome to today's Father's Friday panel. Father's Friday is a program of fathering together, created in partnership with dozens of for-profit community-based organizations and individuals dedicated to improving the mental health of dads, families, and communities. And boy, today's topic is raising empowered daughters. And I am your host and moderator, Tim Taylor. I am the, what would you call it? I'm the creator, star, and director of the one-person play, The Father-Daughter Dance, which is heading across the nation over the next few months. And I also have a podcast of the same name. I have a 22-year-old daughter. I live in San Francisco, and I'm really excited. And I grew up with 4 brothers, so boy, raising a daughter has been a whole new world of learning for me. And I'm really excited to join the conversation today, and thrilled to have on some of the co-panelists. And let me first introduce Michelle. Michelle Travis is a professor at the University of San Francisco. Wait, does that say law? Are you a law school? Oh my Lord, we have a law school professor here. Everybody be aware, there's a law school professor here. And however, she's also the author of Dads for Daughters, a guidebook for male allyship, which I'm guessing comes from the law background, on gender equity. Welcome, Michelle. It's a great way to say it. Did you come up with that tagline?
I did. Thank you.
That's pretty strong. What kind of law do you teach, just so I know?
I teach employment law.
Employment law. All right. Well, I don't think any of us are employed at this particular point with this particular effort, but bring the law side into it. We love it. And I'm also thrilled to to introduce Corden James. He is the father of 3, 2 boys and a girl. He is the founder of Vet Run Movers. He's a motivational speaker, youth family mentor, and founder of Corden James LLC and the Comeback Kid mentorship program. I love it. And as a motivational speaker, Corden draws upon his experiences as a child of transracial adoption and a leader in the U.S. Army. He's also a mentor. My goodness, you've got a long intro, Corden.
You can stop.
You've done a lot. It's like, I'm going to say mentor. Here's the thing. Mentor, a nonprofit that uses storytelling and mentorship to empower fathers called Father Together, and aims to inspire fathers to achieve their birthright through cultivating safe spaces for their families to heal and thrive. And that's all the time we have today. Thank you, everyone. I'm just kidding.
Corden, it was great to be here, Tim.
Wait, Corden, where are you? Where are you at?
I'm in New Hampshire.
Oh my gosh. Do you live there?
I do. Yeah, about an hour from Boston.
Okay. All right. You're like the second person I've met in my 54 years from New Hampshire. That's pretty cool. Michelle, where are you calling in from?
Calling in from the Bay Area, California.
Okay. All right. And finally, last but never least, my dear friend of 20 plus years, Chris Ye, whose bio would take an entire another panel. He is the co-founder, I should say, of Blitzscaling Ventures, a venture capital company here in the Bay Area. He's also a 2-time New York Times best-selling author with works about really about workplace empowerment and growth, looking at things a whole new different way. He also is an improv god. You are an improv god in everything that you do, although he has yet to take his talents onto the actual stage, which I want him to do. And he is the father of.
That would require me to drive to San Francisco.
And he refuses to drive to San Francisco. And he knows everything about the NBA and will play a mean game of Dungeons and Dragons. Chris, thank you so much for joining. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic and looking forward to what intro you give yourself. I mean, you mentioned a lot of things. You did not mention the most important thing, since we're doing video, which is that you have some of the most magnificent hair known to man.
That's true. We had a conversation about this. Just if anybody's looking, I have an Instagram account called Tim's Hair Says. It's all about Tim's hair. I do have magnificent hair. Thank you for that. Although Michelle's probably going to beat me there. I'll take a lauded second. Between you and Corden, I clearly am the winner. No question about that. But no, I'm thrilled to start the discussion about raising empowered daughters, as the 3 of us have daughters. Michelle has plenty to say. And I think maybe I just want to start with Michelle, because maybe you can frame out the first issue, which we want to talk about here, which is sort of the comparative differences of what empowerment means for daughters in relation to, sons, or whatever sexual identification it happens to be. But can you talk a little bit about what that means to navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim, for hosting this really important conversation. So I'm the mom of 2 daughters. Also a daughter myself, but also a law professor who studied gender equality for a couple decades at this point. So I have done a lot of research on comparative roadblocks for girls versus boys in academics, in employment, in wages, in access to healthcare, in STEM, in business, in sports, in you name it. So I'm just so grateful, actually, that all these dedicated dads are actually acknowledging that there are indeed still comparative roadblocks, and talking about what it is that we can do in your role as a dad to identify them and help level the playing field. I love hearing so many girl dads now talk about empowering their girls to believe that they can do and be anything. But talking that talk requires also walking the walk, which is finding ways to use your relationship with your daughter and also your influence in the world to level the playing field in ways so that that belief can be be a reality and not just an aspiration. So when you all share your stories about how you've navigated these things for your own daughters, I want you to know that just sharing the narratives in and of themselves is an important act of gender equality allyship. You are doing gender equality work by doing that, by thinking about these roadblocks, by navigating them, by sharing your narratives with other dads. And it's something that moms like I and just women generally see and appreciate and are grateful for. It turns out that dads of daughters are actually really uniquely well positioned to be advocates for gender equity for a number of reasons. When I got into this work, in fact, when I read research that found that when dads have a daughter, particularly a firstborn daughter, they become less supportive of traditional gender roles, more supportive of anti-discrimination laws, more supportive of equal pay policies, right? So there really is a shift that happens when a daughter comes into a man's life. And so for you all to think about what that means and allow yourself to see through your daughter's experience and to gain empathy for other girls and women is the first and most important step to raising empowered daughters. One of the last thing I'll say is one of the dads that I interviewed for my book said that when he had a daughter, he felt like it got my antenna up to be more kind of attuned to seeing these roadblocks, right? To seeing the way my daughter gets treated differently than my son or boys. And when your antenna are up, that's when you can be powerful allies and advocates for your daughters and for other girls and women out there. So really important conversation.
That's fabulous. It's a great way to frame it. And I couldn't help but think when you were talking about it, Chris, you could probably jump in and comment on this. The sort of two-step process of getting people to see there's differences. And then also once you see those differences, like, and the antenna goes up, like, how do you move through like confirmation bias, like, and how it creates feelings for us and dads for our daughters that we hope will help them versus like get us more upset.
Yeah, and I think that, this is something where we all have to go through this. I mean, all of the male panelists on this particular call are old enough to have grown up in a very different environment. But at the same time, I remember I didn't really see all the barriers until after I had graduated from college and was in the world of work. And that's when it really became apparent to me. Because what I saw in meetings was that women would offer their ideas and those ideas would be ignored. And then I would point out how good those ideas were. And people would say, wow, Chris, what a great idea. And then I would say, no, actually it was Allison's idea, or actually it was Melissa's idea. She said it 2 minutes ago. And that made me realize, oh my God, I can't believe just how insanely stacked this world is against equality. But I think that it has become even more difficult in recent years. Of course, we've had progress. The world is much more progressive than it was. But then we have other things like the work that my friend John Haidt has done on the impact of social media. Social media has had a terrible impact on our daughters, our young women. And so that's added yet another layer of things that we have to overcome when we're trying to create an environment where our daughters can, in fact, grow strong and be themselves.
Yeah. Boy, that's a good one. We have to come back to social media, I think, because that's a great one for how we model and what we show them. But so Corden, when, given what Chris just said, like, what's your reaction if somebody doesn't see what we see with regards to our daughters and the opportunities? Like, particularly if your daughter's sitting there and you're with another parent and the parent's like, well, things are all equal today, with regards to, girls and boys or men and women, or comment on that or anything that's been said so far, because I'm curious to what your take is on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my daughter is 9 years old.
Okay.
And I also have 2 boys that are 14 and 15. So it's been a very stark difference in between raising boys and raising my little girl, the little girl of the family as well. I think in this room, all of us are business owners. And I think about that what that's looked like transitioning from corporate America to entrepreneurship, right? Because now I own my own business, so now I'm focused on like my daughter. I have my daughter all the time, so like she's next up in the business, so to say. She sees me doing all of my work. She sees me at meetings. She comes to work with me. So now that I'm growing a business, I get to look at what does that look like for her as I hire women into my business. And I think, you talked about gender equality and the differences there between men and women. I see it. It exists. I think how to attack it is those conversations that I have with my daughter every single day.
Yeah.
Whether it's the small conversations around how she's building relationships with her friends, boys or girls. It's when it comes to like teaching her the side of business that maybe women don't necessarily get to see, right? Just exposing her to more opportunities in the world.
God, you guys are all more measured than me, and that's not surprising because it pisses me off when people don't see that it's still unequal. It just pisses me off, and I know that colors the way I approach the subject matter with people, and I just don't know. As a dad, particularly when my daughter's there, it's just like when people say things like that, it's just I don't know exactly what energy to put into it because on the one hand, I'm modeling for her, but on the other hand, it's like I've got this fire in me for my daughter. And I don't know. I mean, there's not really a question in that, but I certainly would like to hear it if anybody else has those kind of feelings around it, because it's challenging. It even started with me where it was just like, there's a boys line and a girls line when she was in kindergarten. And I was just like, well, and there's a captain of the boys line and a captain of well, why can't the girl be the captain of the boys line? Like, what's wrong with that? You know what I mean? So, I mean, can I take it from your comments, Chris? Can I take it from your comments that Chris is the happiest person I know? What's the country that's the happiest in the world, Chris? I can't remember. You told me what it is.
Bhutan.
So
Bhutan is the one that measures happiness.
Yes.
But the other country that is often considered the happiest in the world is Denmark. And that is because they have, wonderful social services, but also they have low expectations.
Okay. All right. Low expectations. I don't have low expectations for you, Chris. I always have high expectations, but like you are the happiest person in the world, but does it ever piss you off when someone says something or portrays it in a way that's like, what you see is not real? That's not a limitation.
Absolutely. It happens all the time. And it should not be any surprise, not to make this terribly overtly political, but that the people who fail to see it are the people who, like you, Tim, belong to the white male oppressor class. And I thought you would enjoy that.
Yeah, I do.
But it's true, right? So
Right.
You come from a background where you have been encouraged to, not all the time, because I know a bit about your family background, but
Yes.
are generally more encouraged or more allowed to express your feelings. And where expressing your feelings, even in a very vocal and emotional way, does not carry the same cost. A woman who expresses herself about the unfairness pays a much higher cost. A man of color who expresses himself about unfairness carries a higher cost. And so oftentimes, I think that we develop techniques and mechanisms to be able to not allow the feeling of anger to consume us, but at the same time, understand that expressing it explicitly in the most direct way may not be the way that gets us the best results.
I love it. Michelle, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree
Great
with
point, Chris.
everything that you said, Chris. And in fact, I think that dads of daughters who are in the privileged position of being white male, but who have daughters actually have this, because of the things Chris was talking about, this unique power to be able to be fired up when you see inequality, and to have it actually work in a way that allows people to listen and engage with the problem. Whereas if I said the same thing, it wouldn't be as effective. And here's what the research shows, right? So when someone advocates for something that sort of on its surface appears to be, not in your direct interest. So a man saying, I see gender equity, I see something happening to my two girls, right? The response is often surprise, anger, even resentment, right? But here's the thing. researchers have found that if the person who's speaking up about something that appears to be for someone else's interest shows their own vested interest in it, people listen, and people will hear the message. And so what we found is that dads of daughters, particularly those in positions of privilege, can use their dad of daughter status, actually invoke it and say, you know, I'm a dad of a daughter, and I've seen this roadblock. Let me tell you what I've seen. I've seen it happen. I've seen these roadblocks come up. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this. And that, although that sometimes gets a bad rap for those dads who do it in a, you know, way that's not at the same time engaging in real conversation and gender equity work and learning. If done in the right way, it actually, researchers have found, gives what they call standing to speak. It makes people realize, oh, I understand why you have an interest. I understand why you care, and I'm going to listen. And the thing is, men tend to listen to other men. And so much more powerful for you to sometimes get fired up about comparative roadblocks that girls are facing than for someone like me. So it's a really powerful role that you can play. And it becomes kind of a win-win for your daughter. Also, you know, trying to get others aware of what's happening to help kind of create the world that you want to be there for your daughters to enter into.
Wow. My mind is blown. I've literally never thought about this. I mean, because the podcast I started was to help dads keep up with the velocity of how things are changing for our daughters. And I just did it. And I hadn't even thought of that angle. I stand up for it. That's for sure. So I'm a little on my heels, but because that's quite moving. And I think it's a global imperative. I think the father-daughter relationship is a global imperative. I really do. And it's a unique emotional hack into men. And speaking of that, Corden, can you, what's your daughter's name? So we have that.
My daughter's name is Azalea.
Azalea?
Yes.
Okay. Azalea. When Azalea comes to you and brings an issue that sort of, you know, appears like the stuff we're talking about, what's the hardest thing about supporting her in those moments, given, because you have a very rich background and a lot of different things have happened to you and you bring so much. And it's like when, you know, our daughters come to us and we just want to like let it all out. Like, can you talk about what your feelings are when she brings those things to you and how that conversation might go with her?
Of course. Man, so she's 9. So there's interesting conversations that come about. I would say it doesn't come up in a direct way, but when it does come up, as a father, I have to be able to put that hat on and just sit down and listen to her. Right. And again, she's 9. So, you know, we've been working on emotions for years, how to identify our emotions, our little flip book. So, you know, it comes with the frustration of her.
Hang on. Let me jump in for a second. What did you say? A flip book?
Yeah, they have those little emoji books that have emotions on them. And it's like, it shows you a sad face and maybe it's a funny character.
Oh, that's so sweet. Okay. I've never heard of that. That's awesome. Keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
It's absolutely amazing. So if I can just expand on that. So it has the emotions on the front, and then on the back, it has like a self-care routine. If you are frustrated as a kid, here are different things you can do.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh my God. Keep going. That's
yes.
Really sweet.
So again, you know, as a father, being able to teach her how to handle her emotions, I feel like there is a lot of modeling that comes from, all I can do is really understand what she's feeling and relate it to a moment that I was frustrated. I know that's very stark difference between a man and woman, and just creating that space for us to talk about it. And how does she want to handle that? So when we go back to school, or when we get back in front of our male friend at school, what are we going to do about it? Right. And these are the options, and try to keep your cool in handling it, and know that dad will do everything possible. Dad is doing everything that I know how to do right now.
Okay, that's cool. So I like the idea of listening. That was a really big one for me to learn about. Is she on social media?
I post my daughter. Yeah, we are on social media. She is not on social media per se.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask Michelle, let me ask you this in the daughter role for a moment, take you out of the researcher and the expert. And and even the law professor, if I will. Can you talk about your relationship with your father
Mm.
and what your experience was with him doing exactly what Corden just talked about? Did you have what to the extent that you're comfortable sharing it?
Yeah.
How was that modeled for you, and what impact did that have on you?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, I love what Corden was talking about, how the importance of listening more than talking, the importance of being present more than always having to be active. I think that instinct to want to protect, that my dad had for me, that a lot of dads have, is not always what empowers you the most. As a daughter, when my dad was being protective, I didn't feel empowered necessarily. When I felt empowered was when my dad treated me with the respect that I wanted others to treat me with, for example, and so demonstrated to me that I was worthy of the same respect. And that's what Corden's describing, right? When he's talking about these interactions, it's this level of respect that you're just demonstrating to your daughter, right? I can tell you how important that was for me to then, when you go out in the world and you're feeling that there's greater hurdles that you have to overcome, or you're feeling that you're not getting treated fairly at work, or you're seeing your paycheck is smaller than a man's, right? To innately have this sense that your father has helped you build that, I am worthy. I am worthy of dignity and respect, allows me to find a much more productive way to fight those battles on my own. And it's sort of like that it has come, internalized with me and come with me in a way that's so much more powerful than my dad having to try to fight the battles for me, in a sense. So know that is, that's something that I take with me every day. I had an opportunity when I was in high school to work at where my dad worked for a summer. He was a computer programmer at IBM, and they had some.
Chris is all over that.
They had some like summer internships for kids, for dads who had kids that were in high school and college bound. And so I had one of these internships, and I am the least tech person imaginable, but I was there, and I was, this was high school for me, so quite a number of years ago. And I was, one of the only, certainly very young females there in this setting. It was IBM, it's a tech company. And, my dad just acted as if I belonged there as much as anyone else. And he never said anything to anyone, he just demonstrated that I deserve to be there, right? So that's what I recall the most, and it's more of a feeling and a sense than it is a particular example. But Corden, I think you're right on the mark. Those things matter far more than you can imagine right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Corden.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you for helping me understand, because I think oftentimes I want to make sure. I don't know if there's a right way to do it, or if I can always, if I'm making that impact for her. So it's good to hear that the listening helps as she identifies her emotions, as she goes out into the world. There's more opportunities for her that I hope that she can lean into herself and recall those conversations with dad and just conquer the world. I took her to work with me last week, and she, funnily enough, she told my employee, she says, "So if you work for my dad, that means I'm kind of your boss too." And I was like, my employee was telling me that, and I was like, "Oh no, Zay."
Brilliant.
But also, you're not wrong.
Right.
Brilliant.
That is so good. I also now understand that the way you answered that, Michelle, I 100% understand what you were saying to me about the power of someone like me overtly making a statement that in front of people that makes gender inclusivity a given, not even a question, because that's the experience you had with your father. And is your father conversant with his feelings?
He was not really when we grew up. Very traditional, he worked. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So this was even in some ways more impressive for him, because he just understood this and the important work that he was doing without having the benefit of having these kinds of conversations.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So some people are just,
so over time,
yeah.
it was a process on both our ends for sure.
Well, speaking of feelings, Chris Ye also happens to be the co-host of a podcast with me called Real Men Cry and Laugh, which I have a t-shirt that says Real Men Cry that I wear around all the time. I get so many comments about it. And it's a podcast where basically you can listen in one of Chris and I's phone calls, because that's what it's basically about. But, Chris, when you hear all this stuff, like, I have so many questions, like, because I really want to tap into your ability to talk about Maurice and her fencing and stuff like that, and that she's in college now, but also your ability to pivot that and give perspective on what percentage of the dads out there do you think are actually, when they hear this kind of conversation, are they like, yeah, that's right, that's what I do? Are they like, whoa, how do I build to that? You know what I'm saying? So can you and you can comment on anything else that's been said too, but those are the two things that were coming through to me that I would love to hear your feelings and thoughts about.
Sure. So I should convey the fact that my daughter, Marissa, or Marisa, we named her Marisa. She prefers Marissa. So therefore,
Okay,
we'll call her Marissa.
Oh God. I screw that up so much. And I've had,
That's okay.
I've had dim sum with her.
That is a-okay. So Marissa is 18. She's turning 19 next month, and she's a freshman at USC, University of Southern California. Mm-hmm. And I think you bring up a really great point, Tim, about what do dads think and how much do they recognize it? And I'm going to borrow from another discipline where I'm not sure it's been helpful there, but I think it is helpful here. There is this notion that it's not enough to not be racist. One must be anti-racist. I think that it is not enough to not be sexist. You also have to be anti-sexist. You have to overcome some of the prevailing currents of the world. But it's difficult because, as we have been discussing, you can't sort of clear out the currents of the world by going in front of your daughter and plowing all the water out of the way, because that is not viable in the long run, and It's not empowering her. And so trying to figure out the right way to do that has been a challenge. You mentioned that she is a fencer. So she was a fencer for quite some time, competitive, fenced in the nationals. And it was something that she and my wife really did together. I tended not to take her on the road or anything. My wife would travel with her. And so that was great because they got to be very close and they have a really strong relationship. And part of the reason we liked her studying fencing or any sort of combat sport is that sense of efficacy and agency and knowing, hey, you know what? I can kick someone's ass. And that's fantastic, because one of the things that was the scariest for me as my daughter was growing up is seeing, at a very young age, a young girl who is just so brash, so confident, so moving forward at every step, get to her teen years and feel uncertain of herself and not sure what to do and not speak up as much. And so trying to find ways to allow her to do that. And it's not just a matter of saying, hey, you should feel free to speak up. And of course, we're always here to listen. That all kind of goes without saying, but you have to find other ways. It might be finding a discipline like fencing. So like your daughter, Zoe, who went from volleyball to teaching volleyball, Marisa has gone past her competitive fencing stage and now she teaches fencing. So she'll teach fencing at the fencing academy where she was learning and help train young girls who are just coming up in how to fence. In terms of sort of the things I've been able to do, I think that probably the most important thing I've done, which is more proactive rather than reactive, is to just try to develop relationships with as many strong women as possible and ask them to speak with my daughter. Because it's one thing for her to hear her dad talk about stuff. And it's like, oh, it's just from dad. What the hell does he know? I mean, it's not like I should get his help on my college essays, considering he's a best-selling author. I mean, he doesn't know anything about this stuff. But, if I introduce her to a friend of mine who is a CEO, who is a scientist, who is a performer, who is, amazing in some way, she actually listens to them. And I think one of the most important things in the world is the so-called existence proof. This is why role models are so important, because someone needs to be able to look up and say, that thing I want to do, I see someone who looks like me, who is like me, who is already succeeding. And I'm thinking of the Academy Awards this year. The great Michelle Yeoh won Best Actress for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And she gave a very moving speech. I'm sure you cried when you were watching it, Tim, if you were watching it.
I cried at
she
the
said-
movie with my daughter. I cried at the
There
movie
you
with
go.
my
Of
daughter.
course.
Profusely.
Absolutely.
It was beautiful.
And Michelle Yeoh said, this is for all those little girls out there who are watching right now. I want you to know that you can do this. And
Yeah.
don't let anyone, including Don Lemon, ever tell you to surpass your pride.
Yeah, it's really what Corden was saying about the little things, because every time something like that comes up, you got to say something. It was like when Zoe was little and she'd be babbling at the airport, I would just say, speak your mind. You got to just speak your mind. You say whatever you want to say. And, I know, the idea that you network her, there's two things that came up from what you said. One, it's brilliant that you network her with the people you know, because Chrissy, I'd like to say Chrissy is like my best friend, but unfortunately, Chrissy is everybody's best friend. But the other thing is that there is a person in this world who does not listen to you, and it just so happens to be your daughter, which is crazy, but it's amazing. I'm going to do a little trick here, and I'm going to ask Michelle, because you have 3 dads in front of you, all with daughters, very different backgrounds, very different motivations, approaches, some similar, spirit of being fathers, what we want. If you could ask us any one question, what would it be?
I guess my biggest question would be, what is your biggest fear when you think about your daughter and your daughter's future? Because I think fears sometimes hold us back, all of us, not just dads, moms, all of us, from being full and engaged with the relationships. And yeah, so I guess I would ask that. And in some ways, this relates to what I think is one of the most powerful things that dads can do, which is to be vulnerable in front of your daughters, which is really difficult. We've been taught that that's not a thing you do, but sort of being vulnerable in front of your daughters, but also requires you to kind of do that with each other, with other dads around in a webinar scenario. So what is your biggest fear when you think about raising your daughter to be the empowered future woman that you want her to be? What scares you?
All right, so Corden is signaling to me that I can speak.
Yeah, I thought
and so
Corden.
is
It
Tim.
looked like Corden was going to unmute himself. I
So
don't know
saw
what
Corden,
that was.
I was like, oh, Corden's about to push the unmute button.
That's what I thought it was too. It was like a no-look pass, but it wasn't even a pass. Go ahead, Chris.
He's got it unplugged. All right, so in terms of thinking about these fears, obviously, I think every father fears for the physical safety of his child. And it's like a inherent instinct that we all have. The reason we're in this world is to protect our young, our children. But let's leave that aside, because that's true all across the board. I think that the biggest fear I have for my daughter is, there's all sorts of things that we can provide to our children. What we cannot provide is that sort of love and friendship around them, not from their parents, but from their friends, and ultimately, hopefully, a romantic partner. And this world is making it so much harder to build friendships. The world is making it so much harder to find someone. I mean, my wife and I were, I shouldn't say this, but my wife and I were sitting on the couch. We were watching the Fox reality show, Farmer Wants a Wife, because we love watching these trashy reality shows. My wife was just saying, we're so lucky that we were able to find each other. But it was a different world when we found each other, right? It was a completely different world. And we now live in a world of Tinder and Grindr and all these other things. And so my concern is, we know the most important thing in life is relationships with friends, and relationships with someone that you can love and share your life with. And I just think it's harder to find these days. I'm still hopeful. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, she's doomed. The world will not allow this. But that's my big fear. And of course, that goes hand in hand with the other selfish fear that all parents have, which is When am I going to get grandchildren?
Those things are related. That's really sweet that you worry about her being loved. That's very touching. I think about that too. Corden, do you want to, you ready to jump in for your, to talk about yours? There he goes.
Yeah, I apologize. My computer's doing that thing where it wants to die now. We're almost there. So I'll switch phones in a minute.
Okay.
I think across the board, I've worked with Fathering Together for about 2 years now. And I think after doing plenty of podcasts and listening with people and speaking with Brian, I feel like it's the general fear of failure. I think I feel that just as a man raising my children, period. But with my daughter, compared to my sons, and I hope I'm doing this the right way, but it is that protection piece. I want her to have that fierceness that she has, the speak all, the wherewithal for her voice to be heard. I think oftentimes as parents, we build this certain culture within our home where my daughter knows that she is loved, she is seen, she is divine, and then she's going to go out into the world. And I want to know that those things are going to carry her through to the next level when dad's not there. So it is that fear of, have I been vulnerable enough? Can she also recognize other male roles, female roles around her? Can she recognize that vulnerability in them and realize that she has a place there? I think as you were talking, Chris, I was thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And all of the beautiful things that she needs in the world. And it's that fear around, is she not her capability? How should I say this? It's the fear of her being able to meet her needs. I do, I'm a man, and I know that there's times that I don't take care of myself, right? I slack with my self-care needs, and I overwork, and I do this, and I know she's gonna live a beautiful life, but I hope I'm here to see all of that and to know that that she can see things through, and that the world's gonna treat her well. Right. All of this, I think a lot of the changes we're going to make in the world we may not see today. Hopefully that's for the future. We get to see our legacy pay off, and that this change comes over. And I pray that that's one of those things that, this equality continues to go further and further. The field is being balanced, and that she realizes she has a place wherever she is, whether with dad or not.
And I just want to add in something because, what you said, Gordon, just really touched a nerve with me. We have to make the world as fair and welcoming as we can. But the other fact is that no matter what kind of life people lead, no matter who you are in this life, the world is a constant series of slaps to the face. And right. Tim, I joked earlier, you're a member of the white male oppressor class, but you can sort of look at your own life and say, and yes, of course, therefore it's been smooth sailing. I've never faced any challenges. That's completely untrue. Like all
right.
of us are going to face challenges constantly, no matter how much our parents have paved the way or cared for us or empowered us or what have you, which is why it is so important that we help them, or rather that they find, and we do what we can along the way to help them do this. How can they find their tribe of people, their brothers, their sisters, the people who are going to be there for them when they get hit in the face and need to pick themselves up? Because someday, hopefully, unless the AI people manage to upload us into the cloud, hopefully someday we'll be gone, but they'll still be here. And we'll want them to have a tribe of people around them that will continue to help them be the best person they can be.
Wow, I just thought of something based on what you just said, Chris. Other than the fact that I'm a part of the white male oppressing class, that's sort of goes without saying at this point. It's funny. I don't feel guilty about my privilege, and I'm absolutely willing to use it. And it just never occurred to me that I could use it in this domain. And now that I know that, I'm going to go around swinging that stick for sure. But you said, what was it you said? You said, we're not going to be around, but they're going to be. That's what you said, I think, right? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Here's my biggest fear. It's almost perfectly with what was just, it fits really well what just said. My biggest fear with my daughter is that I don't unconsciously or consciously pass on the generational wounds of who came before me in my family. That is the number one thing that I care most about. And I tell this story because, like, and I'm happy to share it here, that the fact that I've been sober for almost 12 years, clean and sober. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic for a lot of my life, and had mental illness issues. My family had that throughout, and still does. Lost a brother to suicide who was severely drug addicted and mentally ill. And we were the classic sort of everything looks good on the outside, no matter what was going on the inside family. But you said tools earlier, Michelle. It wasn't just that we had tools, just that there was not a demonstrated desire, because I don't completely believe that people didn't get help back then. I've seen a number of instances where people did. Anyway, so because I grew up underneath that brother who was a mess when I was growing up, I always thought I had to be perfect. And I always felt like I wasn't enough. That was the thing with me. And when I was going through my difficulties early in her life, that's the whole point of my play too, is to show people like it's never too late. My daughter would walk into the room she was 3, with a cup of apple juice. And I would say, she's 3 years old. I'd say, don't spill the apple juice. She's 3. She's going to spill the apple juice. And so she does. And my perfectionist, I don't have a good, healthy emotional relationship with my perfectionism. And I look at her and say, we just talked about that. And I don't say it that nicely either. I say it more sharply. And her sweet little self, you know what she ends up doing? She stops taking risks because she's afraid to make mistakes because I'm her dad. And I've had to work through a lot of the guilt and shame of a lot of that stuff that I did that was unhealed. And when I pivoted and started to get healthy more, I just had to keep telling her, take risks, make mistakes. I want you to do that. Because I was increasingly getting a better relationship with, and I'm the one in the family basically that has said it stops with me, with my child. Because when you say, Chris, this is what made me think of it. You said, we're gone, but they're still here. What I don't want to have happen is they're still here and our shit is still there. You know what I mean? And so, I think that is the most important thing for me that I fear about my daughter. And what that looks like is, and this kind of goes to the next thing. And now that we've said all this, Michelle, I'll let you chime back in and comment on whatever we've said. But it's like, so now, like when I'm out doing this play, because Michelle and I were talking before you guys came on, it's like, I have a professional career, I have a Wharton MBA, all this garbage. And I've let it go for the last couple of years and done creative stuff. And when I put myself out there to do this one-person play that I wrote and performed, my daughter texted me shortly before I was to perform for the first weekend, because she was there. Chris was there actually as well. She said, I'm so proud of you for taking risks and making mistakes doing this, because I know there's going to be mistakes. And so those are the moments where I see, the stuff that I did is there. And, when Corden was talking about, if I think I'm not enough, to think that just listening to her and saying that must be difficult, tell me more, is actually, I'm being the dad she deserves, the dad she wants, and the dad she's dreamed of. That to me, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes with it, but that to me is the single thing that is most, it's both a source of fear and great inspiration and hope, because when I see it turn around and go the other way and see the way we laugh together. And I watch trashy reality shows with her, Chris. I should watch we watch Love is Blind. You know why? Because we could talk about relationships while we're watching Love is Blind. You know what I mean? And we talk about mistakes that I've made in a relationship. We talk about my family and all that stuff. We have 4 divorces, 3 brothers got married. We're overachievers. So anyway, so that's the thing that I fear most. And so I don't know. Anybody can comment on it. Pretty much now we're freeform. We got about 15 more minutes left. We can freeform. Michelle, if you want to jump back in with any thoughts on what we've given you, or anybody else commenting on what anyone else said, go for it.
Mostly want to respond with gratitude and thanks for sharing that. That is all of that you just shared was modeling vulnerability. It's modeling vulnerability to your daughters, to all of the dads who are going to watch this conversation. That is gender equity work. It's so powerful and so important. And when you talk about freeing yourself to make mistakes in front of your daughters, to show emotions and fears in front of your daughters, to take risks and fail in front of your daughters. What you're teaching her is to be her authentic self. That's okay. And the more that you're freeing her and empowering her to be her authentic self, I think that's how she will find her tribe, as you were talking about. That's how she will find her resilience, as you were talking about, and you'll know that she's going to go out there and be okay. So thank you. Shout out to Fathering Together as an organization. I sit on the board hosting this Father's Friday series of conversations for bringing dads together in this community to have these conversations. Sharing these conversations and discussion narratives is so powerful. So I just want to say, from a mom's perspective, daughter's perspective, we see you dads, we see this important work. And so just wanted mostly to respond with gratitude.
Fabulous. Corden, you want to jump in and say something? It looks like you're unmuted. Go for it, man.
I'm up and running again.
Let's go. And those red pants are smoking, man. I'm just going to say it.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say it. Go for it.
So it kind of, I go back to some of the previous conversations on fathering together with other fathers again. And I'm trying to remember when we first started a couple of years ago, I think we did this campaign with Dove. It was a girls' self-esteem project, right? And so we took that on as fathers and kind of talked about, like, how do we impact our daughter's self-esteem? And I remember going through that, and it was just mind blowing. And the one thing that, like, stands out to me while I went through events with her was, like, one thing I can do as a father is the way that I speak. So that one made me address. So I'm 6 foot tall, ex-military, all the other cool thingy things. But so, it made me question how my daughter sees me, right? When I'm frustrated, I'm this big, strong guy. I'm 6 foot and she's, 3 foot something. It helped me change my perception of how I address her, right? I started getting down on my knee when I talked to her. This lovely, beautiful voice over here gets much softer when I speak to my child. One thing I remember talking about was the importance of how I spoke about myself, taught her what was important to her. Right. So Dad, I'm 35 now. My back hurts. I got a little roll here going. Right. And I can say that between you guys. But the more that I talked about that and I learned and I listened to it, I would always say, oh, my back, or oh, my knees, or oh, Dad's getting fat, or Dad's getting old. And then she would start to talk about, oh, my knees. Right. or like, again, self-esteem. I'm showing her what's important to her. So if I'm always talking about my body, I'm telling her that her body is more important than anything else, right? And I'm kind of perpetuating those body issues. So it's been a beautiful journey just to raise her. I am typically, my father was very traditional as well. My adoptive parents were very traditional in the sense I didn't hear a lot of emotions growing up. Again, and I grew up in therapy my whole life, especially being adopted and the situations that I went through.
Okay.
So to be able to sit and talk with my daughter about emotions, to show her what a coping skill looks like, to actually model that. There was a moment I was very frustrated, tears in my eyes, and I was driving her to school, and I could feel that I was just going to cry. Like, there was no holding it back. It was in my throat. It was in my face. It was in my soul. And she was in the back seat, and I had just stopped and I told her, I said, hey, Daddy has to process something real quick.
Oh.
Daddy's probably going to cry, and just know that Daddy's okay. And so at this time, I was just learning how to do tapping. So, emotional frequency tapping. Mm-hmm. So I was tapping on my collarbone as I processed through it, and I was breathing, and I got through it. And a couple of days later, I noticed she had got frustrated. And I looked over at her, and she started tapping on herself.
Oh my Lord. That's
right.
So
it was just like being able to carry that coping skill. I'm going to cry again. I won't do it.
No. Crying is welcome here. Believe me. You're going to make me start crying. That's so sweet. Did she know you were looking? Did she know you were looking? Sorry, Chris. Chris, would you jump back in? Hold on.
At first, I don't think she did, but eventually she saw.
Okay. Chris, go ahead.
I just want to underscore something that just happened here that is so important, which is one of the ways we help our kids get help is we model getting help ourselves.
Of course,
Because
yes.
they are
yes.
learning so much from what they see about us. I mean, if you want, like Tim, if you wanted Zoe to get help, the most important thing besides encouraging her to get help is for her to see you asking for and accepting help, because
Mhm.
they are modeling themselves on us. No matter how much my daughter, as you put it, my daughter is like the one person in the world who doesn't listen to me. And as much as that is true, I know she is still watching what I do. And even if she doesn't feel like she wants to be like dad on some weird level, she's going to be like dad. And so it's really important. And the one thing I would add to that is, ironically enough, I have never actually been to therapy myself.
That
I
doesn't
have
surprise
been
me at all.
trained. I have been trained, maybe I was just too happy, but I've been trained as a counselor. I've learned the skills of active listening, other things like that. And what I would say is everyone should look for help. But even if you don't believe that you need help, and you probably do, but if you believe you don't need help,
Mhm.
then at least you can go out and acquire the skills, learn some of the counseling skills, learn some of the active listening skills. Even if you don't believe that you need therapy, those skills will help. And those skills will help you convince your children to get the help they need.
Well, I hope at this point, if there are dads listening to this and what the four of us are talking about feels like aspirational or like too hard to grasp, I can assure you, I was not the dad I am today. I was not the man I am today. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, my father was very demonstrative and affectionate with me. My mom was not like that. But what I'm saying is, it's never too late. I don't care if your daughter's currently 30,
Right.
or your daughter's 6, or your daughter's 40. It is never too late. And it can be small things that you can do to like set it aside, because it's just the toughest part for me is that thing that you're talking about, Chris, about, when we don't get help, we're just passing on the stuff. And you said coping mechanism, Corden. That's like a healthy choice you made and she's making.
Sure.
What is heartbreaking for me is the girls that are out there that are using coping mechanisms like my perfectionism affecting my daughter who won't take risk. It's fascinating to me. I have a TikTok channel. How about that? I have a TikTok channel, and there are a few videos that have like 25 to 30,000 views, and they are all about me talking about how my journey to actually, to heal these things. And there's a lot of 13 to 17-year-olds there who watch the random TikToks, but they watch my videos. And so many of them comment that they wish their dad would do this. I talked about getting sober, and I got like almost 900 comments about people, women and young girls just want, I wish my dad were like that. And what's so wonderful today is that it's like, this is, I don't know if I can swear. Actually, you're on the board, Michelle. Can I swear? Yes. This is fucking awesome. This is just fucking awesome. And I'm at the point now where my hair, I'm like starting to look like Albert Einstein. My hair is everywhere. Like I should be like in a Cure cover band or something like that. I got the sort of 80s punk look going because I'm so engaged. And what has been magnificent about this is that we've created a circle because there's so many different perspectives, both in how we grew up, who we are today. We have a daughter, an expert. We have someone from the Army. We have Chris, who's done a gazillion things, knows a gazillion people, best-selling author, and me, who's like a sober guy. I should be dead. I'm a sober guy. And we're here celebrating what's great about our daughters. And there's a lot of people who are nodding their heads when they're listening to this. And I just want those who aren't nodding their heads and maybe shedding tears like I did, like I am failing my daughter back then. But there's a way out, man. There's a way out. And that's why we do this conversation. And so that was actually my closing thing, although I'm going to have a closing thing at the very end. But I wanted each of you to take 1 to 2 minutes, and you can literally talk about whatever you want. And if you go a little longer than 1 or 2 minutes, that's perfectly fine by me, about literally any subject you want. You can, if you have an idea about a tip that you have, like I write my daughter a letter every birthday. She writes me one. We've been doing it since she's 5. We can talk about, you can give me a practical tip. You can comment on anything we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about. It's like your time. So let's do it in alphabetical order backwards, which means we start with first name backwards. I don't know why I'm making it hard, because I was just going to say alphabetical backwards, but then I was like, alphabetical. I was like, no, Chris B. No, I'm going to start with Michelle, and then Corden, and then Chris. Michelle, the floor is absolutely yours.
Thank you. What an amazing conversation this has been. And I'm reminded when you say it's never too late and small things matter. How true that is. One of the biggest memories I have of my dad that was so empowering was I was a gymnast, and back in the day, being a female athlete was not as extreme as it is now. And I remember him taking me to the lumberyard to buy 2x4s to build a balance beam in my backyard so I could practice in my backyard. I don't think he has any recollection of this. And it is like a defining moment in my childhood highlight reel. Little things, moments matter. So you don't have to be, perfect all the time. Every little moment matters. So, this weekend, if you're going to spend time with your daughters, think about, activity that you can do that will disrupt gender role stereotypes, right? Decide, I'm going to take my daughter and we're going to build something together, right? Or we're going to sell something. We're going to have a lemonade stand, or we're going to compete, we're going to compete fiercely together on video games, or, let's make paper airplanes, right? All those little moments allow her to envision herself as, an athlete was for me, an engineer, an entrepreneur, a pilot, right? And so know that little things have a big impact. And thank you all for your willingness to share your stories. And I encourage other dads to join the Fathering Together community to do the same thing, because it is just so powerful, so powerful. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Corden, take it away. The floor is yours, my friend.
Sounds good. Thank you. So in these 9 years raising my daughter, I think it's always been, so when she was born, her mother, again, shout out to moms. I don't know how y'all have babies. So, her mother went right into the surgery to, tie it all up down there and whatnot. And so I was right with my daughter immediately. From the very start, we had our first few days together while mom was healing, and we've kind of just been close since then. That is my best friend, my mini me. And that's turned into like, how can I just spend time with her? Right. So as a dad, I'm figuring out how do I do this? How do I do her hair? Right. My little black girl. How do I do her hair? I have no clue. And I learned how to do it. Right. I learned how to brush it, and then I learned how to do different styles in it. And we used to do tons of videos of me just styling her hair and just talking with other people. And I can't tell you the value of doing your daughter's hair. And I know there's plenty of daughters. I saw Michelle's face. She's like, I know there's plenty of daughters who like, Dad, don't touch my hair. And as my daughter gets older, she goes to the salon. I still style her hair at least 3 days a week. But when she has it done, I'm grateful. But just the value of like just being able to do her hair with her, being able to, a coloring book. I'll tell you, one of my daughter and I's favorite things to do, there's this park that's got some water by it. And ever since she was little, I used to hold her hand and walk her on the curb. And she would just, 1 foot in front of the other and just walk on the curb. Last week, we spent about an hour just walking curbs together. Just walking. We didn't do anything. We're laughing, we're falling, we're tripping, giggling at each other. We got some pizza afterwards, and that was our date. So just trying to want to remind fathers again, just the ability to be present. I also want to address, I am a stepfather as well. And I want to shout out to all the stepfathers out there. I know that is very tough to navigate if you have a partner who has a daughter. I am trying to learn how to navigate that with a daughter who's not necessarily mine, but I love her just the same. And how do I make those connections? If there's a round 2 to this, hopefully we can have more conversations on stepdad life, raising a stepdaughter, and what that looks like. But again, I'm just noticing being present. That's really all I can do, and make some efforts to try to go a little bit deeper when I'm present there. So again, thank you all. Great to meet you. Look forward to more conversations.
Awesome, Corden. Interestingly, on that TikTok, I got a number of comments from girls who talked about their stepdad, how important it was because their dad wasn't in their life. And I went to ponytail school, Chris Ye. I went to ponytail school because I did not know how to do a ponytail for my daughter. And when I ended up learning it, there's this one particular flip you got to do that I didn't know about it that creates the ponytail. And so she sat there when she was like 5 as I was learning it. So thank you, Corden. And Chris Ye, you're going to have the last say, and then I'm going to do a little closing thing script. But you are the man. Take it away.
Well, as a dad of a now adult daughter, because as age 18, that means she is an adult, I have the perspective to look back over across her entire life. And I think in the early years, Corden, like you described, you're just naturally spending time with her. And that really builds a relationship. And I remember when I was young, I would bottle feed her. I would carry her around with me as we did chores. Sometimes to amuse people, I would hold her as if she were a machine gun and fire her around and various things like that. And that's just the kind of stuff you get to do when you're a dad. And it's all part of having daddy's little girl and how close she feels to you. But she's going to grow up and she's going to need to become a young woman. And guess what? You, dad, can't help her do that. unless you transitioned at some point in time in your life, you had the experience of growing up as a teenage girl, you're not going to be able to do that. And so it's a question of learning how to let go and pull back and not be the primary person teaching her how to live this new life. You still do all the things we talked about, modeling for her and all these things like that. But there are things that as a dad, you just don't understand, don't know. But you can still say, I'm still here for you. And then the hack that I'm going to recommend, that is something that is still very important, is one way to spend time together is to still go on family vacations. These don't have to be like super fancy vacations. Look, if you're super duper rich, you could fly a private jet somewhere. Go ahead, do that. Why not? But we are so lucky to live here in the United States of America, where there are amazing natural parks and wonderful things to see within a 1 or 2 hour drive. And when you go on a family road trip or family vacation together, the fact is you're kind of thrown in with each other. And there are all these little moments that you would think are terrible. Oh, we're waiting in an airport. We're waiting for a train to come or what have you. But make sure that you don't like hop onto your phone, maybe pound out some work emails while we're here. Instead, take the time to be with your family. These are the kinds of things that all of us had when we were growing up in the pre-smartphone era with our parents, and that helped build those kinds of relationships. And I have other friends, some of whom you know, Tim, who are even further along in this process than we are, but who understand that, guess what? If mom or dad can still pay for vacations, even when the kids are 30, they will come back and they will spend time with you.
100%.
And just having that time together is the hack I want to throw out there.
That is a magnificent hack. I'll also advocate for driving my daughter to all over California for volleyball tournaments and letting her DJ, which means she wouldn't put her headphones on. Now, unfortunately, we're going to end this without the question that all of America is asking, which is, what is the cross section between the books behind Chris and the books behind Michelle? Is there any crossover? I don't know, but maybe some sleuths will get on that and figure it out, because I'm sure there's some magnificent ones where there is some crossover. But
I have a whole section on families and psychology and growing up, so I assure you there is crossover.
Well, I think that then you'll have to buy Michelle's book and put it up there. Or maybe vice versa. You buy one of Chris's bestsellers. You guys have been fantastic. You've made this super easy. for me to do. And it was bumpy at times. I'm not a professional panelist holder like Chris Ye, the world's favorite panelist. That's what we like to know. But you are all terrific.
Tim called me for tips. I shared a few.
He did share some tips, but Gordon and Michelle made it so easy. Like the intro was so bumpy. It was so, I'm sorry, we're still going, aren't we? I should supposed to say this when we're done. Oops. There you go. I still have room to grow. I want to thank everyone for listening into our panel today. I have learned a ton, and everybody was really vulnerable. And, you know, we're going to have another panel next week going live on YouTube with more resources and strategies to help you improve yourself, your families, and communities. If you want to get more involved with Fathering Together, as was mentioned, Father's Friday, or any of the important work we discussed today, please contact Fathering Together at info@fatheringtogether.org. Once again, that's info@fatheringtogether, all one word, .org, or fill out the Get Involved form on the website, fatheringtogether.org. Our goal is to help you be emotionally courageous, connected, and committed to those who matter most in your life. And we hope this discussion today provided a few more insights and strategies for you. We will see you next week. Thank you, everyone. I love you, all three of you. Thank you so much for participating.
But Tim, before we go,
Yes.
There's something we still need to hear, which is, if people love this discussion, they want to find out more, where do they go to find out about you, Tim, and your one-man show? So where do they go to find out how to acquire your book, how to follow you on social media? Gordon, how do they find out more about the Comeback Kid, about all these different wonderful things? What's the URL? What's the clearinghouse? Where should people go?
That's so perfect. Thank you. Chris goes into the panel play. Gordon, start with you. Where can they find you?
You can find me on all social media as Gordon James, or you can go to gordonjames.com.
Gordon.
And how do they spell that?
Jordan with the C, James.com.
Chris,
Thank you.
this is going to be like the director's cut at this point, because we technically signed off, but there's so much more. Michelle, go ahead. Chris, keep going. You're doing better than I did.
No, I was going to ask Michelle to go, but I can go first. And if you want,
Michelle, go ahead. Michelle.
Yeah.
All right. You can find me at michelletravis.net. And all my social links are on michelletravis.net. And you can buy my book, Dads for Daughters, at Amazon or bookshop.com. Thanks.
Awesome. Chris.
And Michelle that's with 2 L's, correct?
2 L's. 2 L's.
2 L's. It's very important. Spelling is critical. And you can find out about me at chrisye.com. That's CHRISYEH.com. If you have trouble remembering, picture a yellow elephant house and you will not have trouble spelling my name. And you can find copies of my books everywhere. If you want to look up my book, Blitzscaling, it's my most famous one. That's BLITZSCALING. You can go to blitzscaling.com and it'll give you pointers to where you can buy it.
Man, I feel inadequate. I am not enough. I need support here. I am enough. If you search the father-daughter, I love you, Chris, man, you're the best. If you search the Father-Daughter Dance podcast, Tim Taylor, you will find my podcast. That's the main way you can find me. Or if you want a TikTok, maybe some young folks are out there at Tim Taylor 113. Check out one of my 30,000 view videos. And I'll be in San Rafael, Chicago, and many other cities, and you can find that kind of information from my podcast. And did I forget anything else, Chris?
No, I think you got it. You just got to remember to tell people to rate, review, and subscribe.
Rate, review, and subscribe this, and tune in next week, and let's go and be good.
And if you're watching on YouTube, smash that subscribe button, hit that like button.
This is usually the stuff I remember. We got to go. Like, hey, Chris, Michelle and Gordon have lives. The two of us could like go on for another. Gordon. All right, you guys. Thank you very much.